Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing 7 tips for strips. One of my favorite techniques is using colorful cardstock strips on my cards to create focal elements and bring in lots of color, but sometimes they can be a little tricky to work with, and so I'm going to share some tips for working with those today. And I'm going to be using the Spectacular Shades bundle from Concord and Ninth. This is new from their July 2023 release, and I absolutely love these glasses. Now, they're called shades, but they could be glasses as well. And there is, of course, a coordinating stamp set with all kinds of great sentiments as well. Now, here's a look at the color palette I'm going to be using. These are all from Concord and Ninth, and I will have them linked in the YouTube description. So if you're looking for the colors that I used, then be sure to check there. Now, my first tip for using strips is try something that is not a 1/4 of an inch mark. So you got to know your trimmer. You got to get to know your trimmer. And yes, fractions, they are here to stay. So I encourage you to really try measurements that are at 1/8 inch and 1/16 inch, more or less than what you would normally do. So for these strips today, I'm actually cutting them at 3/16 of an inch. Now, don't let that freak you out. It's just one little line away from the 1/4 inch mark. So it's 1/16 of an inch less than the 1/4 inch mark. But I really find that when I use 3/8 of an inch instead of a 1/4 of an inch, or 5/8 of an inch instead of a 1/2 inch, it just kind of changes up the proportion and really, it just makes it look better. I can't even explain it. Now, my second tip is that once you have all your strips cut, adhere them to something so that you can use them as one element. You can move them all around. So here, I'm just taking some scrap printer paper. I had printed something and it wasn't good, so I needed to just get rid of it. So I save these scrap pieces of paper for things like this. Now, my third tip is to make sure you have adhesive edge to edge, because if you're going to be die cutting these and there's a gap in the adhesive, part of the strip may fall off. Now, tip number 4 is to use some sort of corner. Now here I'm using my Misty stamping tool to make sure that I get everything straight on this piece of paper that I'm using kind of as my carrier sheet. So I'm going to start by pushing that piece of paper up into that upper right-hand corner and making sure that I press my first strip right into that corner, lining it up with the edges of my Misty stamping tool to make sure that I have straight lines all the way across this panel. Now, when I get to my last one, there was no more tape runner adhesive, so I just added a little bit of liquid glue on the back side of that to adhere that final strip. And now I can pick up all of these strips and move them as one. And when I go to put them on my card, I can either put them straight across or at an angle. Now, another thing that you may find helpful in the first instance of adhering these strips to the paper, I used tape runner adhesive and I just applied it all over. You may find that liquid glue may be easier for you. And the reason I say that is it kind of allows you to slide these strips into place. So once again, I'm using the corner of my Misty stamping tool to make sure I start that first strip in a straight line, and then I can continue adding my strips, making sure they butt right up next to each other. But by using this liquid glue, I can kind of slide it up and make sure I close the gap between each of these strips. Now, once again, I do want to point out that you want adhesive edge to edge on these strips, because if you go to die cut this little strip pattern that you've made and there's adhesive missing on the back of part of that strip, it's going to fall right out of your die cut piece. So you just want to make sure you have plenty of adhesive. And then now I quickly have 2 stripe patterns ready to go. Now, I did get a little bit of liquid glue onto my Misty stamp mat here, so I'm just using some alcohol. I keep some rubbing alcohol in a spray bottle, and I like to use a microfiber cloth just to clean that up. And I'm also cleaning up my work surface. Now, I have to tell you, I love my glass mat from Glassboard Studio. I have it linked below. You can use code Carissa20 to save 20% off. It is one of the best tools in my craft room. So now that I have these adhered, I'm just using a trimmer to trim off the excess strips and trim these down. And I do have a couple of card panels that I will be using here in just a bit. I used my Spellbinders Precision A2 layering dies to die cut these, but I did want to share with you that they measure 3 5/8 inch by 4 7/8 inch. Yes, those 1/8 inch marks, they do make a difference. And yes, I did write on my glass board with a permanent marker, and I'm able to clean it off with some rubbing alcohol. Now, I wanted to point out in the Spectacular Shade sets, there are 2 sets of each pair of glasses. One is actually a frame and one is a solid backer piece. And I'm going to be using both the frame and the backer piece in different cases in this video tutorial. So I'm going to start out by cutting the heart glasses frame from some matte gold cardstock from Concord and 9th. And then these kind of rounded glasses, I'm die cutting the frame out of some black cardstock. I absolutely love these. And you can see these are the pieces I'm working with for my first set of glasses. I have the frame and then the solid piece. I've die cut the solid piece out of vellum, out of acetate, and out of white cardstock as well. Now for the frames, I've die cut those out of Tidepool cardstock, a wood piece of cardstock, and 4 times from some plain white cardstock. Those are just there to help me build up the glasses and kind of give them some dimension. This part is absolutely optional, and a lot of these layers are optional, but I'm just kind of doing something to add a little special touch to these glasses here. Now I'm going to show you how I assembled all of these frames together. I'm just stacking up 4 of those plain white frames, and then I'm adding that stack of 4 white frames to the base piece. So this is going to be something where you can nest in the designs. Then I'm going to add the vellum on top of that layered dimension. Then I'm going to add a layer of acetate to give it shine, just like some real glasses. And then on top of that, I am going to make a dual toned frame out of this wood cardstock and the Tidepool cardstock. So I just took that wood frame and just snipped it down in my trimmer. I placed that on top of the Tidepool frame there, and then I'm going to adhere this to the top of these stacked up glasses. Now I have the vellum in there, the acetate, which gives it the shine, and then all of those extra pieces which give it dimension. Okay, so now that we've assembled the glasses, let's get back to my tips for strips. And my next tip is to stamp on a strip using some sort of grip mat or sticky mat. Now, Waffle Flower has these great new grip mats. They designed them to fit inside of Misty stamping tools into mini Misties. I have the one for the mini Misty here. So I've applied the grid layer to the back of it, and this will take the place of my mouse pad inside my Misty stamping tool. But this is a giant piece of photopolymer that's the perfect depth for stamping in your Misty stamping tool, and it's great for holding on to sentiment strips as you stamp on them. But the great thing about it is that it releases very easily. So you can see I just picked that right up off the mat. There's no adhesive. It is made from photopolymer, which is kind of naturally a little bit tacky. And if it gets debris on it and starts to lose its grip, then I can just wash it with some baby soap and water, and it will naturally regain its gripping properties. Now to finish this card off, I am just taking a piece of Honeycomb cardstock from Concord and 9th. I cut it at an angle. I put one end or one corner at the 1 inch mark and the other corner at the 2 inch mark and trim that at an angle. Then I just added my glasses, my sentiment strips, and a few enamel hearts from Concord and 9th as well. And that completes card number 1. So let's move on to card number 2. I have my little strips that I've put together. I have my gold heart frames, which I have stacked up 4 plain white die cuts behind them. Now these don't have acetate or vellum, they're just the frames itself. And I am going to create another sentiment strip by stamping on a strip of vellum. This time I'm using the I Heart You sentiment from the Spectacular Shade stamp set. And I am using that grip mat, which I can then leave in my mini Misty to hold my strip in place as I stamp. And that is really a great tool for stamping on strips. Now you can also use an adhesive mat like the Brutus Monroe or the Misty mat, but I find that I'm really loving the script mat. Now my next tip for strips is to create an angle or a banner end. And on this strip, I'm creating a banner end by cutting a slit in the center of the strip and then cutting from each corner to that center slit, and it creates a perfect banner shape for my strip. Now you could also cut a simple angle as well. I think both techniques just add a little something and add a little refinement to your sentiment strips. So try that the next time you are using a stamped sentiment strip. Now I'm adhering this strip pattern, which I adhered to that paper earlier, onto that card panel that measures 3 5/8 by 4 7/8. And I've done that at an angle and just trimmed off the excess. Then I've added my glasses with a little bit of foam adhesive, and I added that entire panel to my card base using a layer of foam adhesive, and you could see that Nectar cardstock peeking out from behind. Now my final tip for strips is to use a stamped sentiment to add to your stripped effects. So you can see I have all of these beautiful cardstock strips going down my card. I do want to mention I left out the honeysuckle color on this particular strip pattern. But right below that, I'm going to stamp this "You Are Every Shade of Awesome" sentiment, and it kind of continues that strip pattern down on my card. Now I've added my black glass frames. I've also added some dimension behind those by stacking up some plain white die cuts. And I did add some acetate in the lenses of those to make them feel like real glasses. And I added a little hardware using some Tidepool enamel dots at the side. And this entire panel I adhered to a Juniper cardstock base. So there you have it, 7 tips for using strips on your card. Hopefully you found something helpful in here. I have to say, this is one of my favorite ways to add color and lots of color to a card really quickly and easily is by adding some strips, whether that's a sentiment strip or a whole bunch of cardstock strips. And these are the things that I do to make working with all of these strips a little bit easier. Now, as always, I will have links to the featured products used in these projects in the description at YouTube. So if you're looking for something in particular, be sure you check there. Or you can head on over to my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com. I'll have that linked below as well. Over there, you'll find more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies. As always, thank you so much for stopping by. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed these projects, as well as the 7 tips for strips that I shared. I would love it if you would leave a comment below and let me know which of these 7 tips is your favorite and which one you're going to try the next time that you add some strips to your card. Once again, thanks for watching. I'm so glad you're here. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end. You know, if you've made it this far, you are one of my favorites. To subscribe to my channel, go ahead and click the button on the left side of the screen. And here's a couple more video tutorials I thought you might enjoy.